next is Cynata Therapeutics with the ticker code CYP, a clinical stage stem cell and regen medicine company advancing Cymerus, a proprietary stem cell platform. To tell us more, I would like to welcome CEO and Managing Director Kilian Kelly. Welcome, Kilian.
Good morning.
Could you start by explaining the core principles of the Cymerus platform technology? How does this differentiate Cynata from other companies in the regen medicine industry?
Sure. So stem cell therapies have shown a huge amount of promise, especially over the last, say, 10 to 20 years. But a big problem has been how you make these therapies at scale. And conventional methods rely on an ongoing supply of the new donors. So that's logistically challenging and costly, but perhaps more importantly, it results in a lot of variability between different donors, and that makes the products inconsistent. And that's a huge problem when you're trying to make a pharmaceutical-like therapy. So the Cymerus platform overcomes that. We use a novel type of stem cell called an iPSC, which allows us to make an essentially limitless number of doses from a single blood donation. So we completely avoid those challenges I mentioned with having to rely on new donors. So it's a real game changer for how these therapies are made.
Yeah, okay. Cynata has reached significant milestones in clinical trials, particularly with CYP001 for the treatment of steroid-resistant acute graft versus host disease. Can you discuss the outcomes of this trial and what these results mean for the future of this development?
Yeah, so it is quite a mouthful, and it's also a disease that most people probably haven't heard of, which is lucky for them. It's a rare disease, but it's a really awful disease. And to simplify it, we can call it GVHD. And this occurs in certain patients who have a bone marrow transplant or other similar procedures to treat blood cancers. It's really terrible in terms of the symptoms it causes, and it's usually treated initially with steroids. But if steroids don't work, and they don't work in a lot of people, the outcome is really grim. So most of those people unfortunately then pass away. And we did a clinical trial in people who have this condition who had already failed to respond to steroids. And we treated 15 of them, and we saw really encouraging results. So 13 out of 15 showed an improvement of at least one grade, and 8 out of 15 showed a complete response, which means the disease essentially resolved entirely. And we saw an overall survival rate at 2 years of 60%. Now that might not sound very high, but in the context of this patient population, it really is. So previous papers around that time were reporting survival of around 20%. So they were really encouraging results. And we've now got a phase 2 trial ongoing in GVHD, which is a global trial in Australia, the US and Europe. We recently started recruitment in that trial, and all being well, we'll expect results from that sometime next year. So it's a really exciting time.
And that brings me to my next question. With multiple trials, ongoing trials, including the osteoarthritis and diabetic foot ulcers, and a forthcoming trial in renal transplant, how does Cynata prioritize its research and development efforts? What factors influence these decisions?
Yeah, well, actually prioritization is really important for a company like us. We're a small company, obviously, so we have quite limited resources. And one of the advantages of our technology is it has many different potential applications. But the challenge there is we don't have the resources to pursue them all at the same time, right? So we really have had to spend a lot of time prioritizing. And what we did was we looked at a few factors, one being the unmet need. So graft versus host disease is a good example where there's a huge unmet need. And that's the kind of therapy that we want to develop, where we're bringing in something for life-threatening diseases that don't have a solution right now. The other things we looked at include what do the clinical trials look like? So that includes how long do they take, how much do they cost? And also then we looked at the sort of strength of evidence we have that suggests that our therapies are likely to be effective in these conditions. And I should mention as well, though, in terms of prioritization, we've been able to partner with 2 academic institutions who've got grant funding for 2 out of our 4 trials. And obviously that's a huge help for us because it means we can then direct our resources towards the other 2. So basically graft versus host disease and diabetic foot ulcer we're funding ourselves, and kidney transplant and osteoarthritis are being funded by grants, which is a great bonus for a company like us.
Yeah. And so investors and shareholders are particularly interested in commercial viability and scalability. How does the Cynata technology address these aspects, especially given the challenges associated with the traditional MSC manufacturing?
Yeah, so look, this really is a huge issue. In my opinion, you know, the difficulty in making these cells at scale in a consistent manner is really what has sort of held this back, right? We've had lots of really good clinical trial results with conventional manufactured cells, but bringing it to that next level for commercialization is the challenge. And we really have the solution to that because we can, as I mentioned earlier, make a limitless number of doses from one blood donation. And that means we have the consistency because we're continuously making it from the same starting material. So we believe that really is where the advantage of our technology lies. It's that ability to make it commercially scalable.
Regen medicine is a field that's both highly innovative and complex. What are the biggest regulatory challenges Cynata faces? And how do you navigate these to bring your therapies to market?
Yeah, so look, you're absolutely right that when anytime there's novel technology that's complex, there's regulatory challenges that go with it, and regen medicine is really no exception to that. But in my view, the biggest regulatory challenge really is around making the products consistently, because that's a fundamental requirement for pharmaceutical type therapies, right? The regulators expect them to be consistent batch to batch and year to year. And as I said, that's a real problem with conventional manufacturing methods, but our platform helps to resolve that problem. So I think we're really addressing that major regulatory challenge. And we've developed very good relationships with the regulators around the world. So we've had numerous successful interactions with the US FDA and their equivalents in Europe, Australia, Japan, Canada, and so on. So we think we're really well positioned to make sure that we're keeping abreast of those regulations.
Brilliant. And looking forward to the future, what are the next big goals for Cynata? Are there new therapeutical areas you're planning to explore?
Well, right now we are focused on the 4 active programs that we've got going, but we do have a lot of preclinical studies that suggest that we could have an opportunity in other therapeutic areas, including cardiovascular and pulmonary diseases. But as I mentioned earlier, right now we're focused on our own resources on those existing programs, but we have an active business development program where we're essentially looking for partners, potentially larger pharma companies who might be interested in either licensing our existing clinical assets or potentially using our platform to develop new therapies in other therapeutic areas. And that would then allow us to keep going with what we've got going on internally while they move forward with other avenues separately and in parallel. So that's really what we're trying to achieve over the coming years.
So then finally, what should shareholders be looking for in the next 3 to 6 months?
Yeah, well, we've really got a lot going on. So this quarter, we're hoping to start recruitment in one of our new clinical trials, which is in kidney transplant patients. We've also recently started recruitment in our global phase 2 GVHD trial. So that's really kicking on now. Later this year, we would expect to get initial results from the first cohort of those kidney transplant patients. We also expect to complete our diabetic foot ulcer trial and shortly afterwards get full and final results from that trial. And we're also aiming to complete recruitment in the GVHD trial, which would then give us results next year. So we really have a lot going on in the coming months and lots of potential inflection points.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time today, Kilian. Exciting times for Cynata. We look forward to hearing from all the future updates.
Thank you very much.